All right, and I see a handful of people just joined in, so I want to let you know that we are recording this webinar and we are going to be posting it on our website, and we're going to get started. All right, so this webinar is for our Agricultural Clean Water Initiative Grant Program. This is a grant program that we've been operating in its current form since around 2018. And we typically release a biannual larger funding opportunity, and then in between those biannual funding opportunities, we have more discrete funding opportunities. So this is our biannual large funding opportunity, for lack of a better or fancy title. And so we're going to be talking about that today. So I want to set the context a little bit as to what our AgCWIP program is and help you navigate to the resources that we have available around this program. So I put a link in the chat, and I don't know if people who joined after I put the link in can see it. So I'm just going to copy it again. So this is a link to our website, and I'm also going to show you on through my screen share the web page. So hopefully you can see the Agency of Agriculture website. And I'm going to back up for a minute because our website has a lot of information, and sometimes it can be hard to find information on it or not really sure which program it's embedded in. So agriculture.vermont.gov is our main webpage address. And what I do most of the time is I use our search function. So if you're looking for the materials again and you can't find the link, I use our search function, and it's the first search result. Okay. So this webpage has all the materials that we're going to be referencing today. And before we get into that, I'm going to set a little bit of context for our program. So our Agricultural Clean Water Initiative program is really our core program and our mechanism for moving funds to our local and regional partner organizations. And these organizations are providing services to farmers, education and outreach, technical assistance to support the improvement of water quality. And new this year, which we will get into a little bit more, is climate change mitigation activities. This is funded with the Clean Water Fund primarily, and so we do have reporting requirements that we will also get into in this webinar that we require of the grantees, but we also report the outcomes of these funding to the Clean Water Board. And I wanted to just highlight another resource, a little bit of a side tangent, but we have our Agency of Agriculture has an annual report we complete every year. We're working on got a little bit of echo on someone there, but it's okay. We are working on updating our annual report, but I just wanted to share with you that this program is captured in that annual report. So this reports on all of our assistance programs, the programs that we're essentially moving money out of our door to farmers, partners, local businesses, organizations, and whatnot. So this is an interesting report if you're interested in knowing more about what our division does and the type of programs and services that these funds provide. AgCWIP is a very small part of this report, but I always like to put a plug in for it because it's a good, you can really dig into some of the data. So, and it includes, so for example, technical assistance visits. If you go to that page, you can see, you know, it includes some of our partner organizations. It includes programs. So you can click around and sort of look at data in a way that is interesting to you. All right, so let's get into the meat of why we're all here today on this webinar. So we at the Agency of Agriculture, we're releasing this request for proposals, and we are anticipating awarding out up to $7.5 million through this program, which is a considerable amount of money compared to previous years of our AgCWIP program. This is in part because this funding round is including some funding through the American Rescue Plan Act related to our state's climate action plan. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But that's one of the reasons why this funding round is a little bit larger than it has been in the past. So we're going to go right in, and this isn't going to seem overly thrilled. I think this is really exciting, but I don't have any, interactive PowerPoint slides or anything that. We're really just going to stick straight and simple to what the request for proposal says. Again, if anyone has any questions at any time, please feel free to pop them in the chat or raise your hand. I'm happy to pause and answer those questions as we go. All right, so we released the application last week. It's open for 6 weeks and applications are due December 20th. So that's a really important date. Make sure you write it down, put it on your calendar. If you're going to submit a proposal, it needs to be submitted by December 20th, 4:30 p.m. And it's submitted to electronically. Submit electronically to agr.waterquality@vermont.gov. So that's a really important, seems simple, but very important step in this whole process is make sure you're submitting that by the deadline. We're doing our webinar now. Again, it will be posted online. We also will be posting a frequently asked questions document. So any questions that are asked today or that I receive or my coworker Noah received, we will be putting that together in a document to share online. Oftentimes people have really good questions or clarifying questions that aren't addressed in the RFP, and we want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to know what the answers to those questions are and how they might help with their application development. All right, so the RFP, it's over a dozen pages, so you can skip around if you'd like to, but we're just going to walk right through it today. So before I get into the who's eligible, what does scope of work look like, and that type of thing, does anyone have any questions right off about where to get the grant materials or how to submit an application? Okay, we'll keep going. All right, so we also use this request for proposals and want to take a moment to acknowledge that the grantees that we work with through this program, as well as all of our local and regional partners, are really important for meeting our state's water quality goals. So we do consider this one of our cornerstone funding programs. And while it is grants and money, we do also highly value the partnership that these grants bring between the Agency of Agriculture and the organizations receiving these funds. So that is another important component of this program is we are trying to, foster those relationships and partnerships because we have our grant funding programs for farmers. The federal government, NRCS, has their grant funding programs for farmers, and we need those local players to help connect the resources together and reach our water quality goals on agricultural land. So an important program for funding the work of our grantees, but also for that partnership development. All right, so as I briefly introduced, there's 2 funding sources this year feeding into this grant opportunity, and that's the Clean Water Fund. There are some clickable links in here, so you can read more if you'd like some more context on these different funding, but it is state, state tax dollars. And then we're also incorporating about $1.5 million from the American Rescue Plan Act. And this is in coordination with the Vermont Climate Action Plan. So the reason why we have bundled this all together is because there are many co-benefits to water quality practices or climate mitigation, climate resiliency practices. I think many of us on this call who work in the agricultural community and the conservation space know that many of these practices have multiple benefits and can be formulated together to reach a variety of goals. So we've bundled it together to help sort of streamline the application process for people who are interested as well. And I'll get into a little bit on, some of you might have questions. Well, I only want to do some climate work or water quality, and and give you some tips and recommendations on how to complete an application that is clear to your own organization or your own self and clear to the review team at the Agency of Agriculture. I do want to make note that we do have 2 buckets of overarching outcomes that we like to see embedded in proposals and projects, and that is, the clean water component, which is really non-point source regulatory compliance and non-point source pollution reduction. That's really, a core outcome of these grants is that we're helping farmers, helping landowners or operators of agricultural land reduce their pollution to local waterways. We also very much value that there is an economic and environmental viability aspect to farming in Vermont. And those who are engaged in some of these discussions know that climate mitigation, climate resiliency, conservation stewardship, those are all important pieces and components to economic and environmental viability on farms. So keep that in mind as you're developing your proposal. Those are the 2 big buckets of outcomes that we're really hoping are connected and articulated through the proposals. All right, so who can apply? So pretty wide open. We are asking that applicants submit a single proposal per organization. But individuals, farmers can apply, agricultural service providers, nonprofit, for-profit, private sector, schools, educational institutions, those are all eligible. State and federal government agencies can collaborate with any of these groups, but we don't invite those type of agencies to submit proposals on their own. The other thing that people typically like about this grant program is we do not require matching funds. So we do encourage you to consider how to use these funds to leverage other programs or grants that you have, but we do not require matching funds. All right, so are there any questions about eligibility? All right, we'll keep walking right through the RFP. All right, so the way that we break out these grant programs, and this is actually the same outline and what your grant agreement would look like if you were awarded funds, is we break out, or we ask applicants to break out what they're proposing into. This year we have 3 main activity areas. So under activity area 1, organizational capacity development, it talks about the type of things that are eligible for funding through this grant program. We recognize that providing services to farms, landowners, students, the public regarding agriculture and water quality, those cost money and often have associated costs and needs beyond, the direct visit. So these are examples of things that we have funded in the past through this program and would consider funding in a proposal. So we have staffing. Maybe you need field supplies for your conservation planning, software improvement. Maybe you have a board and you want to do some board development or some strategic planning. Maybe it's a mentorship or education program. Think a little bit about your organizational capacity and what type of activities you could use some additional financial support for to enhance or take on an initiative in that space. We are asking if you are proposing funding for staff time. We did make a note here that we will be prioritizing proposals that incorporate or articulate how they're going to be supporting that position. And we are going to be prioritizing applications that either expand a position or fund a position that's at least half-time, full-time equivalent. So what full-time equivalent means is a 36 to 40 hour a week work schedule. And so we're just looking to prioritize applications that have outlined how the funding is supporting their staff in a substantial way. All right.
Mary, looks like we got
Yeah.
a question in the chat.
Sure. Do you want to read it, Don?
I'll read it for you. So Willie wants to know, does organizational, quote unquote, imply or infer sort of a favorable lens on nonprofits versus private businesses?
In our ranking, we don't distinguish between the two, but I will say historically, applications that have an organizational capacity component are typically coming from nonprofit organizations, but there's no weighted ranking per business type on that activity area. All right, education and outreach. Oh, I see a hand. That did actually pop up on my screen. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, sorry, I would have thrown it in the chat. The chat bubble doesn't seem to be functioning. Would those supplies include things extended to like a relatively economical drone, like a thermal drone, or something capable of doing in-field surveys and accelerating that process and maybe getting some more high quality data?
Those are eligible. I'll be honest, we haven't funded those yet, but I won't say whether we would or would not. So if that's a part of your proposal and you think it's an important part, certainly incorporate it, and the review team will take consideration. But yes, the field supplies are meant to be materials or equipment. When I say equipment, things that you as a conservation planner or technical service provider may need to enhance your service to farmers. We're not talking about like machinery and that type of equipment. Okay, so activity area 2 is education and outreach. So this is maybe your organization wants to host a workshop series on grazing or a workshop series on cost share programs available to farmers. This is that activity area. And it could be hosting workshops, or it could be developing an educational resource like a website or a guide sheet, fact sheets. This also, could be a space for educational programs. So this is actually a pretty open space. Any activity that you think would qualify as, you're reaching out to farmers, you're reaching out to the public, you're trying to distribute information around water quality and agriculture. And then this year, climate change mitigation, those are typically eligible activities. There is a note here that so the required agricultural practices. So again, tying back to one of those overarching priorities about regulatory compliance. The required agricultural practices do require farms to receive educational credits related to this list of things here. So if you are proposing educational events, we strongly encourage you tie those events to one of these topic areas and make water quality credits available for attendees to that event. And I'm happy I wasn't planning on doing it in this webinar, but we do have a process on how to get water quality credits for your event. There's an online form that you can fill out. It's not very it's not most events that have anything like any type of relation to water quality are typically approved for water quality credits. So, but I do like to make a note here that if you are planning on doing workshops and events, we do have some priority on these water quality credit opportunities.
One
and
more
I
thing,
do, yep, go ahead.
just an earlier question about funding positions. Can a new position have some of their funding supported by other funding sources?
Yes. So we don't necessarily require applications spec out and give us the recipe for a position. But we do encourage, I think that really can help boost your application if you're, explaining how the position is funded and how it might be leveraging another funding source. And I do also want to note too, like applicants can still submit funding for part-time positions and less than that point FTE. Our point was that we are prioritizing applicants that are considering, how that staffing structure is going to work. Okay. Sorry if I'm making you dizzy scrolling. One other note I want to add on the education and outreach. So all these bullets are sort of generalized, and then we have this one bullet that's very specific. So there's a lot of regulations in Vermont around land use. And there's sometimes some confusion around agriculture. And so there is this bullet in here. If you are an organization that has any interest in navigating some of those spaces, we are looking for some proposals that can help in the education and outreach around some of these topics that need some clarification. And it's not necessarily that we're asking applicants to provide that clarification. It's more helping distribute the information. So this is just an example of the on-farm composting, some of the recently revised rules and increase in farms interested in doing on-farm composting. So with these type of projects, I would recommend, if you are interested in applying and including in your proposal education and outreach around topics that have some regulatory nuance to it, we would expect to have a pretty coordinated partnership in developing those outreach materials. So it's a little bit of a caveat there that if you are going to propose anything that has some nuance to it, we'll probably have a closer relationship and it would be more of a coordinated partnership effort with the Agency of Ag. Okay. All right. Any questions on the education and outreach section? All right, technical assistance. And I will note that education and outreach and technical assistance is really where the bulk of the funding through this program, the type of activities that the funding through this program goes to. All right, so technical assistance is moving that outreach and education efforts into more one-on-one assistance with farmers, helping them get compliance or helping them implement a new conservation practice or tweak or enhance a new conservation practice or sort of ask questions and you try something that may be beneficial to them. There's a list here of what that might look like. It could be conservation planning, nutrient management planning, resource assessments, sampling, precision agriculture, grazing, case management, coordination. It's the whole suite of, working with the farm and navigating the various cost share opportunities that are available. The one note with technical assistance is if your grant receives funding for technical assistance, we do require tracking in our partner database. So our partner database is a system, it's a geospatial system that maintains records of the farms that we know of that are active in Vermont. The state grants that they're receiving, that's actually new this year, is that partners with access to the partner database can see the state grants that the farm is receiving. And you can also see who the farm is working with. So this is a really important, to us, this is a really important data management piece because it feeds into that annual reporting that we have to do every year where we aggregate the information and share it to our funders and help continue this funding program. Of course, there's training and guidance that is provided if you're not currently a partner database user, and if you are an AgCWIP grant recipient and using the partner database, you are only to be using the partner database for your AgCWIP project. There's some terms there. Questions about technical assistance? All right, so one change. So those of you that have participated in AgCWIP before, I should have said this at the beginning. There's been some minor tweaks, but for the most part, our activity areas have really remained the same. And I'm realizing now that I actually have a typo in this RFP. It's kind of fun. So one activity area that we did take out as a discrete activity area is conservation practice surveys. So there's some of you on this call I know that have done conservation practice surveys and really like doing them and may want to continue to do them. You can include those in your proposals under the technical assistance activity area. We didn't keep it as a discrete activity area because it wasn't really at the same scale as our other one. So it's more of an administrative change, but if you'd like to still do conservation practice surveys, which for those of you who may not be familiar with them, those surveys are an effort to collect information on practices that farmers are funding on their own and not through state and federal programs. So it's sort of an effort to understand how farmers are investing their own time and resources into conservation on their farm. All right, and then activity area 4, so this is my error, should be a 4, not a 5. We do have an other category. So we do fund a little bit of some research projects. It's not a huge part of the AgCWIP program, but we do fund them. So if you have another project that you don't feel like really aligns with organizational capacity, education and outreach, or technical assistance, you can nestle it under this activity area. What we ask is if you do propose an other project, that you're very clear with what you're proposing to do and what the outcomes you anticipate being. And all these activity areas apply to both water quality activities and/or climate change mitigation activities. So you can bundle them together if you'd like. All right, so, oh gosh, it's already 1:30. All right, so are there any questions about eligible activities? All right, so I'm going to kind of go through this. Oh, Emily, I see your hand. The hand is the one thing that pops up on my screen.
So I feel like it is the mention of climate change activities, is that a new addition to like what a workshop can be about? It just seems a little bit more expansive than I've envisioned the workshop topics can be in the past. And I also was wondering if there are boundaries envisioned on that climate change mitigation is like a really large, but is it just as it applies to agriculture, basically?
It is just as it applies to agriculture, but you are correct that it is an expansion of what we have in the past set some sideboards around. So in our past AgCWIP, we've set some sideboards around, events and workshops really needing to be focused on water quality. But this does expand that, expands that eligibility, I think, a bit more. It's still pretty broad. I think as long as your education outreach events have some articulated connection to both, likely, those would fall within the framework of this program. And there is a part, so we're going to look at the application template in just a moment, and there's a part that we're asking to sort of help people think about how they might want to articulate that in their proposal. All right, so I'm going to kind of go through this a little bit quickly, but if people have questions, I'm happy to answer them. The performance requirements are very similar to our AgCWIP program for the last several years. It is deliverable based, so we base our agreements based off of reporting and progress towards meeting proposed goals. So your grant proposal, your application should clearly articulate what you expect the outcomes to be of the work that the program is going to fund. And in this RFP is a table of the activity area and example outputs and outcomes. These are really our core tracking measures. We really incorporate most of these into all of our AgCWIP agreements. Not necessarily all of them, the ones that are applicable. But if you have other ways that you want to measure your success and your outcomes, please propose them. We're happy to take a look and consider, if that's a reasonable measure for progress. The one thing I do want to note that is changing is we have asked, and this has been a point of confusion in past grants, is, well, where do I describe the staff that's going to be supporting this work? They're doing technical assistance, but it's organizational capacity. Where do I put it? So this year we've just pulled that completely out, and I'll show you in the application template where we want folks to sort of describe their project team. So feel free to take a look at this. And again, this is our core list of tracking measures, but you are welcome to propose slightly modified or new ones. But be aware that if you are awarded funds, we would probably negotiate with you on making sure we have some of these core ones in there. All right. So this is an important section on our ranking and selection criteria. This has also changed since previous grant rounds. There is some preference for nonprofit organizations. Just want to note that. We've added this new category, clarity. We really want you to do your best to be articulate and straight to the point with your applications, which is, a skill to be succinct. But just be considering that, maybe when you're doing your proposal, you have someone else read it that you don't work with as closely and say, hey, does this make sense to you? That's something that I've done before and we've done, on our team. So consider the clarity of your application. Watershed planning, this used to be geographic area. So instead of prioritizing proposals based off the Lake Champlain or Connecticut River or Lake Magog, what we'd really like to see applicants do is tie it into the strategic watershed plans across Vermont. So that might be tying it into the Lake Champlain TMDL. It might be tying it into your tactical basin plan, which there's a link here to take you to the tactical basin planning page. We want to see some connection to the efforts that are being put forth by other state agencies and local partners and regional organizations in strategizing, what do we need to do to meet our water quality goals here in this watershed? So please take that into consideration as you're developing your proposal. The biggest ranking criteria is impact, which is typically the case in these grant rounds. This is where you're describing what you're going to do and what the outcomes are going to be. So this is really the meat of the application, making sure that you're articulating, this is our plan, this is how we're going to get there, these are our hoped outcomes. And then cost is also part of the selection criteria. All right. This seems a little bit out of place, but this is the timeline. Again, they're due December 20th. All questions will be posted on our website by December 8th. We'll probably have a running frequently asked question document on our website up until December 8th. Excuse me. Our goal is to notify of award in mid-March. And our goal is to have all grants that are approved and awarded signed and executed by June 30th, which is the end of our state fiscal year. So it is a 6-month process for us to receive the applications, review them, and then negotiate if we need to those deliverables and those reporting requirements. But hopefully we can be a little ahead of June 30th and make it more like 4 or 5 months. We'll see. Okay, so this is more details just around sort of the logistics of a grant agreement. So again, we base our payments off of reports. So there are reporting requirements. We're still on a 6-month reporting schedule. And there are report templates that are provided as a grantee. All right, so this is the part I really wanted to spend the most time on, but I guess I've been a little too chatty and it's already 1:41. So
really quick.
Yeah.
People should not plan on covering work happening before June 30th.
So any work covering before your grant agreement starts. So you could, if we're really on top of it, you could have a grant agreement signed and started between March and June. So it all depends on when your grant start date is. But everybody has to have a start date before June 30th. Okay, so this year we are requiring all applicants to use the proposal format, and I'm actually just going to go ahead and go to the proposal format because it pretty much is this. All right, so back to the web page. If you keep scrolling down the web page, there's a how to apply section, and there's these 2 requirements, the proposal template and the budget spreadsheet. These are both required to be considered a complete application. If you do not have Word or Excel, or that is a form of, if that Microsoft suite is not available to you, please reach out to me individually and we can work on an alternative, because I know that not everybody has Microsoft Office. Okay. So when you click on the link, it takes you to this second page, and you're going to click on attachment A proposal template, and it's going to automatically download, hopefully, to your computer. If you have issues with this, please let me know. And now I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment and share my share attachment. Okay, let's see here. Okay. All right, so you're going to get to Word. And this is a very important step. I should add this to the website. You need to enable editing on the document when you download it, and then save as, and save it somewhere where you can work on it, okay? Because I don't want you to be working on this and then it disappears into the internet cloud. So please be sure you enable content and save a copy to your preferred location. Okay, so the template, basic information on the first page. This first part, you're going to talk about your project team. Who's going to be working on this project? Who's going to be doing this scope of work? And keep it succinct. We do not have required word limits. We do not have required word amounts, but we have put in a recommended, this section should probably be about a page. Okay. So keep that in mind.
Hey, Mary, your screen went blank.
Oh no, I knew that was going to happen. Is it still blank?
Yeah. Do you want to send me the where you're working on the link?
Oh, hold on a second. Let me try again. I think it did that because okay, now can you see the Word document?
I can see it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, hopefully it stays. All right, a short connection to your watershed planning. And then your proposed scope of work should be the bulk of your application. Please include a table. Okay, so the table is essentially a summary of what you're proposing to do and what the outcome is going to be. What we've added is basically a checkbox Is this activity related to water quality? Is it related to climate mitigation, or is it both? I expect most of the activities are probably going to be both, but if you have a specific initiative that's really focused in on climate mitigation activities, please indicate that. And the reason why we want this indicated is because on our back end, we're going to set up grant agreements based off of, we're going to make some assessments and judgments on the review team as to how to distribute those clean water funds and those ARPA funds. All right, project impact. This is a little bit of a newer section. It is different than the proposed work plans. So this project impact section is really about how are you going to evaluate the impact of your proposed work, and also incorporates a little bit of the why are you proposing this. So those who have maybe done program development or process improvement type trainings, this is also known as the theory of change. How and why are you developing the scope of work and what's your desired impact? We're not asking for a novel in this section, but just some connection points of why you're putting your proposal forward and what is the outcome of it. All right, and then the budget and narrative section. So I've tried to put some instructions in here. We are asking up front for a detailed budget. We have not in the past, but eventually we usually do ask for one in the grant agreement stage. So we're just going to get it over with in the beginning and just ask for it up front. So please complete attachment B, the budget spreadsheet, and I'm going to show it to you in just a minute. So what you're going to do is you're going to open that spreadsheet and you're going to see that there's tabs for each activity area, and you're going to complete it with your expected time on the project. Do you have printing costs? Are you going to be subcontracting? Mileage? Maybe you're going to buy some soil probes. Okay, so you're going to include all those things in there. In the worksheet is a tab that's called summary, and the table in this proposal template should match the summary table in your budget narrative. And then one other important note is if you are a current AgCWIP grant recipient. So we have some active AgCWIP grants right now. You can still apply. You're not limited because you have a current agreement. You can apply. There's no limitation there. What we ask is that you keep your proposal and your budget packaged together in what your funding request is and what the proposed work is associated with that funding request. And I'm happy to talk more individually with folks if you have questions about how to present that in your proposal. All right. Let's see if I can share the budget spreadsheet, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. Okay. Noah, can you see the Excel sheet?
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay. So when you first open this, it might look a little intimidating. But take 5 minutes to orient yourself to the budget spreadsheet. I'm happy to walk through it with you one-on-one if you'd like someone to just talk through it with you. But this is the budget spreadsheet. And so you'll see, in the organizational capacity development, you have your personnel and then materials, travel, printing, sort of miscellaneous. And it's the same thing on in each activity area. Okay, so try your best. We know some activity areas kind of overlap with each other, but try your best to budget kind of thinking about that activity area and sort of task area. We're not going to hold you by the penny to your budget. If you are awarded a fund and you are awarded a grant, we're not holding you to the penny, but for us and for our funders, it's really helpful for us to understand what percentage of funds are going to technical assistance, what percentage of funds are going to just supporting the people who need to do this work. So that's a really helpful tool for us to administer this program and continue to receive funds for this program. There's a summary tab. Again, this table, you can even copy and paste it into your proposal template, but it should match your proposal. Okay. So I've done a lot of talking. Questions?
Looks like we've got one coming in from the chat.
Okay, let me answer. Okay, let me answer the one from the chat, and then we have time to take questions. All right, so the question is, I'm wondering about the possibility of incorporating a 10 to 12% admin cost of the budget. Is there a line for this? Is the budget based on a billable rate? So that depends on your organization and how you want to put it forward. We've seen people submit based on a billable rate. There's also, you can also include indirect rates. We do have an indirect rate limit on this grant program of 20%. But that's certainly something that you should be able to incorporate into your budget. And I'm happy to chat with you more about what that might look like, or how we've seen that come in from past grantees. And yes, every applicant, everybody putting proposals together should consider what their time is going to be to facilitate reporting and grant management. That can be included. That is a given with any grant, AgCWIP grant.
So are you open for verbal questions now?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, thanks, Mary. So you and I've talked about this, but I just want to kind of have it in this meeting, I guess, about being able to look at research projects that will be looking at some research that really hasn't been done, at least to the level that we'd like to see it done, to kind of advance, really. So in particular, just looking at, just as one example, do rock minerals ground down finely enough, do they actually have some influence, positive or negative, on mineral associated organic matter in the soil, which is important to know and to be able to recognize. Or anyway, so just that kind of thing. You had mentioned to us me in a meeting before that all this money has to be spent by when?
That's a great question. So this money, I seem to be getting an echo from you, Willie.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, it's probably just my wood stove humming in the background. I'll mute.
Okay, so that's a really good question. So this funding round is anticipated to have funds obligated and grant agreement timeline spanning 2 years. So we are hoping that these projects will be completed in 2026. Part of that is because the ARPA funding has to be spent by 2026. So that is our goal. So it is a lot of money to go out the door and be put into projects in 2 years, but we have it now, so we want to distribute it. I will make a note, and I think we had mentioned this. If you have a project that you know is going to be longer or take more time than 2 years, what I recommend you doing is splitting it up into phases. And maybe, this funding source can help fund that phase 1. Maybe it's project development or project scoping. That could fall into the category of organizational capacity development, or in that other category, or maybe it's even education and outreach. So I think that we have done that before, where we've had proposals come in and we haven't had the budget to support a full proposal. And when projects are organized by phases, it makes it a little bit easier to fund a portion that can still contribute to the overall goals. And then there's a question in the chat. Are you assuming that in 2026, there will be the same level of funding? So if we create new positions, they aren't just jobs for 2 years. So that's a great question. So anytime grant funds are tied to positions, we know that position stability, job security is a really important thing for people. I should have showed in the beginning. So when I shared that Power BI report of our investments, AgCWIP's been around $2 million annually. We plan on at least being at minimum $2 million annually. We're hoping to get up to 3 or 4 million annually. The Clean Water Fund is an annual appropriation to us. So unfortunately, I can't guarantee that in 2 years, we're going to put out another $7.5 million funding round. But as long as there's a Clean Water Fund and we are part of that Clean Water Fund budget, we anticipate the AgCWIP program continuing. Sorry, that's not a black and white yes or no answer. It's just the nature of state-funded programs.
Mary, would you be able to touch a little bit more on the first part of Willie's question on innovative research projects?
Sure. Thanks, Noah, for looping me back to that. So we have in the past funded some innovative research projects. The key to that is that they're well articulated and that they have attainable targets outlined. So they need to have some described outcome and goal that is achievable and trackable. So I think that that's really a key component. And also the other thing that research and innovative projects ties to as well is the applicant's experience and project team. But they are eligible. It's not a huge part of our AgCWIP funding, but you can apply and we'll take it into consideration.
Can I ask a follow-up then?
Sure.
So do you think it would be a stronger proposal if it's sort of phased and it also drapes over? I mean, it would anyway. These kind of projects, they're going to go across, to some degree, they're going to go across capacity building and education and TA. I mean, if they're including those as well as sort of carving out, this, or at least trying to develop this research project that has this innovative element to it. We're not going to be able to do this kind of research in 2 years. It's not going to show us, as far as we can tell, we're not going to have meaningful data in 2 years' time, but we could have the setup for how that gets done and the buy-in from farmers and other partners potentially to kind of make sure the project is as robust as it can be and as fundable for the next step as possible. Does that sound like a reasonable way to think about it?
I think that's a reasonable way to think about it. And the thing that I like, or the thing that I heard from you. Sorry, I'm like echoing. It's super distracting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I hope you can still hear me though when you're muted. Yes, we know that 2 years of funding isn't going to get a research project very far, but if you're considering how that project is going to result in technical assistance or on the ground implementation and you're incorporating that into your overall goals, I think that can make it a stronger proposal. And I heard you say farmer buy-in, partnership, collaboration, building up that team that's going to help you build a higher chance of success is really important as well. So, I think that those type of pieces of information are going to, elevate your proposal. Articulating the overall goals and how they tie to this AgCWIP funding, and then also your partnerships and collaboration with, who are you going to need to work with to make this a success. Okay, there's another question. Could this funding pay for Cornell assessment of soil health tests with follow-up reports and plans for farmers? These funds have been used in the past for some soil sampling efforts. I think in the past where the balance has been is considering you know, in the past, we've had more limited budgets, so whether you want to use those funds for soil sampling costs or staff time to take those soil samples. So I would pitch it back to the interested applicant and you as a you know, someone who's starting to put a proposal together about what your priorities are for funding. But yes, that could be eligible. All right, I know we're at 2. I'm happy to stay on for 5 more minutes if people would like to ask more questions. But I do want to respect time as well. Again, the webinar will be posted. It is being recorded. It will be posted. But I'll stay on for a couple more minutes and keep the recording going if people have questions. Otherwise, everything, the recording will be posted. We'll have a frequently asked questions posted, and there will be some more just email reminders and a press release coming out in the next week or 2. So there'll be some more information coming out. Michael.
Thanks, Mary. And Noah, you might have some insight on this question since you've already participated in our program. I'm wondering if our ongoing series of workshops that we conduct down here out of our community resilience forums that we run in the fall could be like they don't stop after 2 years. Our plan is to have it be a continuous engagement process. But would activities like that be a good fit for this, or should I search for funds elsewhere to fund those activities? Right now, we're just doing it out of pocket.
I think if there's an agricultural component to those, yes, this funding could help support those.
Thank you.
All right, well, I'm happy to chat with anybody on the phone if you have more specific questions. I can't necessarily tell you what to apply for, but I'm happy to chat with you about the application process and the ranking and selection criteria. All right, well, I hope you all have a nice afternoon and don't hesitate to reach out with any questions.
Thank you very much.